So it says, Froskurinn announces esports retirement. She says, this industry is really, really messed up. Well, you know what? This is kind of the, what does Tim love to say? You get what's coming to you. What did the Joker say in Joker? He said, you get what you effing deserve. You reap what you sow. She had her famous meltdown. Was that like about a year ago now? How long ago was that?
It's getting close to that.
Sorry, I'm not as cool as you guys.
Okay,
I don't know.
she was a host for G4TV for was it X Play or was it
Yes.
just Okay, so they had what was called the sexism in gaming rant, and can you imagine why that wouldn't go over well with a large group of gamers who are all it skews men by
people love being lectured to about how bad they are. Yes.
As Adam Sessler goes arf to his camera, and it's one of those things where it's when somebody makes the joke like couldn't have happened to a nicer person. Like I don't like this is what I'm talking about. It's not them that I feel bad for. It's all of the employees that work there that had nothing to do with this, that lost their jobs. They're the ones you should actually shed a tear for. Those people had nothing to do with either of those persons' rants, yet they're the ones who lost jobs.
You're so nice to people. You're looking at Adam Sessler and you're like, well, I'm wondering what's going on with his life. Is he okay? And I'm just like, this guy's being an idiot on the internet. I'm just going to laugh at it.
So this is her quote.
Way nicer than me.
She says, I've been angry for a long time with my peers for not using their power and their voice to stand up for others in the industry. Had to come to some hard terms that people who I'd known for years who I thought were good friends just weren't. Devastated me for a long time. Anyway, I'm leaving the industry, found new work elsewhere. This industry is really messed up, and what happened to me and plenty of others wasn't fair, and it could have been avoided if we had all stood up together. You let me down, but I get why. Cheers and good luck.
But I get why.
Yeah, she's actually.
Do you though?
But the thing is like she didn't stand up for something. She just was really mean to people. She didn't. Okay, at the very least, you could criticize her if we were being 110% fair to her. If you were standing up for something, you didn't do it in a palatable way that actually spoke to anyone.
It wasn't like, hey, these are great women I want to like build up in the gaming industry. They're awesome. No, it was, you gamers, you're sexist, right? Yeah.
Which I'm sure they love to hear. I'm sure they
Always.
went over really well.
They loved it so much, nobody watched the channel, and then it just sank.
It instantly died off to almost nothing. And to me, it speaks to one of those things. Like, imagine I, for a second, went to the chat here and said, all of you people who are watching this show, you're all bad people. Who does that?
Well, if you did that, you'd get hate comments, and that'd fuel the algorithm, so you might want to consider it.
But who does that? Like, who does that in the context? Like, I feel like that's only done from somebody who doesn't have a concept of, like, their words have actual meaning.
See, I think it comes from a place of entitlement. Like, they feel like they deserve, like, it's not even deserve. Like, of course they would be given this platform. Of course they would have this audience listening to them because their message and their ideas are so important that people, like, obviously need to hear them, right? Like there's no humility in that.
No, it's the opposite. If you look at this, if you look at her second statement here where she says, what happened to me wasn't fair. It's like, wait, you had agency in what you did at this channel.
What happened to me
right?
that I could not have predicted if I put any thought into it.
Well, also, like, imagine if you were to do that, like our words have consequences. If we were to say something like that here, you caused a mass exodus from some aspect of the job. Like, you can't just write articles that are extremely rude to people for no reason, right?
Saying
like
me specifically,
anyone.
You
like,
specifically,
you wouldn't write something that's extremely derogatory towards the people that are paying your bills,
right? I mean, you can do it. I don't think I would get it published here, and also, like, to what end, right? If you feel that way and you're willing to go down this ship, you have to, like, be honorable enough to be like, I said what I said and I stand by it. Yeah. Whereas, like, she is now, it seems like, being like, I, as a victim, what happened to me that was beyond my control, like, there is no responsibility being taken here. And in fact, like, it sounds like she hurt a much larger organization.
Yes.
With her decisions that probably no one actually asked her to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's funny too, because, like, me and Dane talk about this a lot off air, and he was talking about, he's like, look, I used to love X-Play. I used to love all of this stuff growing up, and it came back in an iteration that didn't really work anyways, because they were trying to be, it would have made more sense doing Twitch exclusively maybe, or doing something other than trying to do network television. Like, they were basic, like, they were on actual cable, like in a $20 million studio. It doesn't really make much sense with that much overhead for something like that. But I don't think that there's anything wrong with at least asking why certain people feel as if, like, they don't have a responsibility to at least do their best for the job. But at the same time, your boss, if your boss doesn't tell you that what you did was wrong, and Sessler's there like doing this, and it seems to be completely 110% okay with it. Like, who am I to tell them that they can't do that, even if it ends their business? Right? Like, I don't think anyone here would want us going off on massive rants against the people that are part of this company, the people that watch these channels, the people that love this stuff. There's a lot of crossover. The people that watch this show, they watch Timcast, they watch IRL, they watch Tim. Like, what if I was on here just like being mean to people for no reason? It doesn't make any sense. Why would anyone feel comfortable doing that? And why would you feel entitled to not lose your audience? Is it because you think that what you're standing up for is of such great significance that the other people will also believe that? Or that you believe that your virtue will actually work as some type of shield against actual consequences for your actions? Most people who live in the real world, who work regular jobs, who have a 9-to-5 job, they've got kids, they've got car payments, they've got all of these responsibilities, they don't have the luxury of worrying about sexism in gaming. If they're watching gaming content, it's because they have time to game after work, or it's something that they listen to a show like that when they're done. They don't care about this stuff. And these types of topics, outside of this type of content, doesn't do well with normal people.
Yeah.
Like, is there anything that you can think of, like in books? Like, this is a big problem in YA, like where people complain about other creators there, and they don't realize how toxic it is. And I hate that word because I think it's overused. They don't realize how toxic it is to the environment, and people just don't focus on what they're doing. Ethan Van Sciver said, what did he say? He says, when after she made her post, he says, "Fantastic. You got a job on a fun show that was supposed to be about video games, and you tried to make it stop making it being about fun video games and about your own persecution as a woman by the audience. Video games skew heavily male."
That's just what they do, though. Is if even if you go back to the Harry Potter article, like if you see the first like couple paragraphs, it's I. These guys always make it about themselves and not actually what the topics are at hand every single time. Yeah.
So it's like, especially in that industry where it skews heavily male. I think women, chat might be able to help me with this one. I think women skew heavily in phone games, but in general, video games skew heavily male, and they're combative by nature. It's part of the culture. So why would you antagonize them when your business model is selling a product to them?
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, do we see this as a reflection of the kind of accept my rhetoric or
you're bad
or look like a bigot that like maybe comes into comic book writing or anything else? Like,
it's worse in comic books.
Oh, it's so much worse in comics.
Really?
So much
Why?
worse in comics.
Well, I mean, that's kind of where I came from. Is I kind of came on the scene because I went and researched comics, and it was back in like 2017. And I went to a comic book store, and the guy who owned it was like really dejected and sad. And I'm like, what's going on,
You
pal?
okay?
Yeah, can I help? And he said, my sales are way down. I'm like, what's going on? He's like, you haven't been paying attention? I'm like, no. And he says, well, all the Marvel characters have all been replaced. Like, Thor's a woman now. Spider-Man's a black guy.
It's funny, too, because then now DC's worse.
It's worse.
Like DC at that time wasn't great, but you had like Black Label and some of these like the prestige titles, like the James Tynion stuff.
Yeah.
That was still doing fine, right?
But they almost don't care that much because DC's not that big a percentage of their sales. He said Marvel was 70% of his sales, and his sales were cut in half because of this stuff.
And here's what would happen. These shop owners would go to, whenever they'd have events, they would bring these issues up to Marvel and to the industry leaders, and the journalists in comics would then write articles about how these shop owners are racist bigots, and they would basically be shamed into silence and told to buy things that they themselves knew would never sell.
Correct.
Because nobody cares about race or gender swapped characters. People love characters in their original iteration. You can make a character any race, gender, sexuality, as long as you write a good character and you don't just change something that people have a strong attachment to initially. The X-Men have been diverse for decades. Everyone knows that, right?
Right.
There's no reason to make all these changes, but we got all new Marvel, and what was that, 2017? I thought it was early.
It is. I mean, but now they're doing stuff like they're implying that like Cyclops and Wolverine are, in relations with each other. I mean, it's bizarre. Yeah.
Why? Like, just to seem like
pregnant Joker at DC.
Oh yeah, I remember that one.
And then the guy's like, it's just a joke. I'm like, and here's the thing. I actually laughed about that. I'm like, look. There's a long history of sci-fi.
Word, but that's like people being like, "Oh, it was just a joke." Like that's like semi-grooming technique.
No, here's the thing.
It is.
In science fiction,
it's not just semi.
In science fiction,
creepy.
Yeah.
In science fiction, there's a precedent for that type of story in the past.
Yes.
Long ago. But we all know that that's not what this is.
Yeah,
Like,
I was gonna say in like Sims 2, when you have like aliens, like
Yeah.
the men can get pregnant if they get abducted by aliens.
And
So,
Junior
like,
was the greatest movie
and
of all
has
time.
anybody seen Junior? I was like somebody needed to
Have you seen Junior, Hannah Claire?
no.
Somebody
Oh my gosh,
needed to
Chad.
make the cover of that, like to redo the cover of that movie and put the Joker's head on the cover of Junior.
That's a great meme.
Yeah, it'd be great. So it's like they did this, like they injected this ideology into the comic book industry, and they started to watch it fall apart. And I have to admit, like just like with wrestling, these are spectator sports for me. I quit collecting and really caring about comic books as that part of the industry years ago. Wrestling, I haven't really cared about in years, but I follow the industries through social media, through podcasts and stuff like that. So it was like watching a slow motion car wreck and watching all of these movements and all of these things sprout out from it that were organic, fan-led revolts against something that anybody with a brain, with two brain cells to rub together, could see was a mistake. Meaning, even if you want to change characters, you don't change all of them at the same time. Like,
They used to kind of do that a little bit. I mean,
Yeah,
if you
that's
look at
what
it,
I'm
like
saying.
they made Jon Stewart Green Lantern, which is the
and
Black Green Lantern. People like the character
People love
because he
Jon
was a
Stewart
good
Green Lantern.
character.
And they're doing him in the DC.
But they also didn't remove Hal Jordan
No.
and just have him there and then do Superman and Batman at the same time. So it's just like it came across a little more organically and again as a new character.
I remember this one story that somebody was telling about how during one of the recent, it was a couple of years ago, the iterations of the Green Lantern Corps, and they had like the power rings that they were selling. So they had like like a black power ring, like a green power, like all the colors, and they had a white power ring, and then they had to remove it because people complained, and they had to like X amount of days since DC screwed something up, and they have to like tear the page off and start from zero again. But it's like all of these things, anybody with half a brain could see that this was a problem, that making this many changes was not organic, because people have a sense for that. People have a sense for when something isn't organic. That's not hard to understand. And comics is worse, I think, than the video game. Well,
when I did my research into it, because I started researching it because that's as one does.
Yeah.
If you're semi-autistic, I guess. But I did, and I looked at all of the Marvel writers at the time. They had 80 different writers on their books, and I just went to every single one of their Twitters one by one. And all of them were espousing like extreme left-wing politics. Every single one of them. There wasn't even one person who just was like, I'm just about books. I'm just going to have my feed about books. Every one of them had political content on it. And I'm just like, they're all getting hired just based on their little politics, not based on anything else. And that's what's destroying this guy's business.
It's like that line, like when you're hiring, like, oh, we think you'll fit into our company culture.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
What is that
exactly it.
culture?
Well, and they do it because the idea that a lot of people would have is they would push back on them. They're like, look, we don't care if these are your views, but leave it out of your books, and maybe don't be mean to people on social media. But they never have the wherewithal to like make a separate page for their like a personal page, because they like the clout that comes from having a blue check. Well, what used to matter about getting a blue check mark,
It matters even more now, sir.
because they would have their blue check mark because it would say Marvel writer in their bio. So that was the clout. So they espouse their political views through the clout that they've gained by working for a company. Again, the phrase I always use, standing on the shoulders of giants. They get to stand on the shoulders of Jack Kirby and everyone and say, look, we believe this, and that, not realizing that the things that you've been put in charge of, the characters you've been given privy over, have histories that go far and beyond.
Yeah, they're not even original to you.
No,
Like,
they will.
No.
Yeah,
You're
so
using someone else's work to push.
You're a caretaker.
Yeah.
And
for
it
the
is
time
it is
being.
all for clout too, because if you actually look and find out what these people make too, I mean, there's a reason they're angry.
Yeah.
It's pretty bad. The Marvel and DC really use these people and just hold them down, just because it's like we own all this stuff, and that's why I think it's important to kind of make your own characters as a
I'm
writer.
moving
thing.
it, guys. They're getting freaked out because
Sure.
of the meme in the video that he keeps saying bye, and they find it disconcerting. Like, and that's the part that always bothered me, is because, like, look, you are a caretaker for a property that's valued much, much higher than, similar to like what you mentioned with Star Wars. You're given the privilege of writing about something that was created years, if not decades before you, that has an extreme level of cultural significance that matters to millions and millions of people. And the fact that you can't look at the gravity of what that means and say, maybe I should put aside my worldview for the sake of the character. that speaks a lot about the worldview of the people writing it. And
a good writer actually puts the worldview from the character's perspective.
Exactly.
Right.
Always.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, like, it's always funny. Like, one of my favorite things is, like, if you watch a TV show long enough, you eventually figure out when the bad writers come in because the characters just change.
Yeah.
Like, if you get 9 seasons of a TV show, a character will just start acting differently, and you'll never know why. Well, you know why, because there's a writer on the show who either doesn't care or wasn't given research or doesn't research their work.
My primary example of this, which I know you both will deeply relate to, is actually Gilmore Girls, which is a classic.
I watch it every night.
Do you actually?
No, of course
you
not.
Don't.
Yeah.
Don't. But it's a really interesting show in a lot of ways, partially because at the time the scripts were much longer, much more intricate than anything else that was being produced on that kind of television. But it was a husband and wife team who produced and wrote the show for like 6 seasons. They had disputes with the network, and then the last season is like it's a different show. I mean, the timing is different. What the characters say, how they behave. Like, I can only imagine what it's like to grow up with a comic and then to suddenly be like, here is something completely different, but it's in the skin of something you care about.
Yeah.
Like, it's very disconcerting.
And it's cheap. And it just proves to you that those people didn't have the talent to hack it themselves. It's like what's going on with Velma. With them not like she could have made Velma and it would have been a stupid show that no one would have watched, but you could have done it and it wouldn't. I mean, hopefully she would have aged up the characters and not made it so creepy. But like she could have made that show without any of those characters' names and it would have been no different and it would have been fine. Everyone would have hated it still, but it wouldn't be causing the outrage that it's causing now because you're crapping all over something that previously tons of people cared about. I want to read this chat. It's not a super chat from Pariah Scion. Says Brett. But generally, if the X-Men was a metaphorical expose on the politics of the time, isn't what they are doing just par for the course? I would say no, because the writers back in the day were able to tell stories from both sides of this of the aisle and let you figure out for yourself what side you agreed with.
They were. If you look at like what Stan Lee was doing, I mean, you had that X-Men deal, which was, of course, it was kind of a civil rights deal, but I mean, at the end of the day, like you could just read it real quick and be like, oh, it's just a dude fighting a blob. Sweet.
Yes.
And that's about all there was to it. But on the other end, like, you know, you had Iron Man going and fighting commies. I mean, so he did both at the same time, and, you know, you could read what you like.
It's funny, too, because the movie actually does it well. Civil War presents you very reasonable arguments as to why to, I mean, I never side with the statist, but like, it presents you the side like, look, you could rationally understand where Tony Stark is coming from, saying that we as super powered beings need to be put in check. We may disagree that the government needs to do it. And you can understand where Captain America is coming from, saying like, look, if I see something happen that's bad, I can't help but intervene. There's both good arguments there. And that is, in a lot of ways, a side story to a political thriller like Winter Soldier was, right? So it's not like it can't be done with nuance and detail. They don't do anything with nuance and detail.
It was actually
anymore.
examining the government overreach, like just as a topic, and it's just actually somebody who's thoughtful, trying to pay attention to it, and that's pretty cool. Actually, when you see that, you're like, that guy who Mark Millar's the guy who Mark Miller. I'm sorry, he doesn't go by Millar. Is the writer of that, like from the comic end of things, and he actually wrote that from a very thoughtful and diligent perspective, and the dude's a brilliant writer, and so kudos to him.
Yep. It's funny too because I love those first 2 X-Men movies. I love those first 2 X-Men movies. It's like that was
when
at
did
a time,
they come out?
2000. 2000, I don't know when the second one came out. It was either 2002 or 2003. But it's like there's a lot of good commentary in there. It's just not heavy-handed. Mm-hmm. It's just they don't know how to like they it's kind of like the what's the
It's like a lost art. It's like they don't know how to subtly. It's like sleight of hand. They don't know how to slip a message in without like punching you in the face.
So then the question...
They're trying to slip messages. They're trying to punch you in the face now is the problem.
Okay.
It's active.
The question isn't... Yeah, like back in the day, the message came second. Now the message comes first because they're worried you're not going to get it. So it's even doubly insulting because they think you're stupid. They're dumb thinking you're stupid.
Correct.
Like it's like they failed Dunning-Kruger. Like it's bonkers, dude. So look, I think of video games a lot the same way that the comic book artists in the comic, not all of them, the worst of the worst in all of these industries are always going to bite the hand that feeds them, not realizing that these larger corporations, obviously Marvel Comics will put up with it. They'll put up with the bad writing. DC will put up with the bad writing, and it still works because you know what? At Disney, who owns Marvel, comics are literally like a blip on the spreadsheet. Like they mean nothing to like the size of that division is like who's in Bob Iger sneezes and he spends that much money. Like, he just does. Like, in general, I don't think they care. Plus, as we've talked, me and Mary talk all the time about how entertainment is in a post-profit era where money doesn't seem to matter. Like, they don't seem to care about profits.
Well, that's something we talked about a long time ago. It's what I said when we talked about Game of Thrones and the Lord of the Ring franchise. Like, there was this weird, like, are they going to do well? And it was like it didn't matter. Like, ultimately, they are producing this content knowing that in the wash, in the grand scheme of... That one got me. In the grand scheme of their, like, ability to
Thank you.
Spit it out.
Thank you.
Trying to be professional. No, I'm just kidding. But like in the grand scheme of things, like, yeah, they could lose several $1 million on this this venture because it doesn't matter. They're such a mega corporation. They're making profit. Like, at the end, they're still in the green.
Disney doesn't care because all the money, like look, the theme parks still do well. Like the theme, like I mean, they're not making as much money as they used to, but theme parks are still big business.
And they
the
can
merch
sell all their T-shirts and all that stuff. Like, because if you look at it, there's Game of Thrones shirts in Target and things like that. They're making money off that.
They're making tons of money. Like, it doesn't actually matter. And so, like, that idea of like free market consumers affect what's going on, like, it is gone. Like, that is tampered with.
Yep. It's a sad thing to see. I don't know. Like, sometimes I have to set myself back and ask myself, look, I wasn't aware of these issues when I was younger in the same way. So maybe it was similar back then. It doesn't feel that way to me. Sometimes people will get me to question whether, you know, the idea that like people can get you to question what's right in front of your face. Maybe it wasn't so different back in the day, but I think it was. I don't think all these things were the same. So the number one thing I can say, guys, is if you've got a fan base, don't be unduly rude to them. Don't be mean to them. Shocking idea. Thanks for watching. Listen to full episodes of Pop Culture Crisis on Spotify.
Keep up with us on social media and make sure you subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss the show. Bye, guys.